Tension in the room was palpable as the reporter leaned forward, his smirk ready to fire. "Miss Leavitt," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "With all due respect, don't you think your political views are a little outdated?" His eyes glinted with the certainty that this question would corner her. The room fell silent. Every camera in the room was focused, every eye on Karoline. But she didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. What followed would leave the entire room in shock. "You're just so young," he continued, tapping his pen against the desk with a smugness that could only come from someone who thought they had already won the battle. "Do you really believe you have the experience to challenge the status quo?" The audience waited. They anticipated a nervous laugh, a defensive reply, something weak. But Karoline? She wasn't about to let anyone define her by her age or her views. As the reporter leaned back, almost expecting her to fold under the pressure, her reply was like a thunderclap, bold, powerful, and utterly unexpected. Karoline Leavitt was no stranger to challenges. At just 27 years old, she had already carved a name for herself in the political world. Unafraid to take on the tough topics, she wasn't about to let a woke reporter or anyone else decide her worth. She had proven her point on countless occasions, but this time the stakes were higher. The reporter, young and eager to prove his ideological superiority, had a different agenda. His question wasn't meant to dig into policies or ideas. It was a direct attack on her age, her experience, and her values. The question wasn't about her knowledge or political insight. It was about trying to belittle her, to show her as just another rookie, unworthy of a seat at the table. But Karoline wasn't just anyone. And today, she was about to turn the table on this so-called seasoned reporter. She had an answer that would leave him speechless. She had a message that was bigger than just politics. It was a statement about integrity, values, and what it really meant to lead. The silence stretched on as the reporter leaned back, his eyes gleaming, waiting for Karoline to break. "So, what's it going to be?" he said, almost taunting her. "How are you going to defend your so-called qualifications?" The cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes. The tension was thick in the air. Karoline's mind raced. She wasn't rattled, but the reporter's arrogance was almost palpable. He thought he had her cornered. She could feel the weight of his smug expression, the belief that a simple jab about her youth would undermine her entire career. But then, she stood taller, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I'm not going to defend myself," Karoline said. Her eyes locked onto the reporter with unwavering confidence. "You don't need experience to know right from wrong. You don't need decades in politics to see that this country needs change, real, meaningful change." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some reporters shifted in their seats, unsure of what was happening. They were used to politicians scrambling for the right words, trying to please everyone. But not Karoline. She continued, "You want to talk about experience? Well, let me tell you something. I don't need to be part of the broken system you're defending. I don't need to be one of the people who's been sitting in their cushy office, making deals for years while everyday Americans suffer. What I need is a sense of urgency, a sense of what's right." The reporter blinked, clearly caught off guard. His expression faltered for a moment, and Karoline didn't miss it. Karoline's voice softened, but her words were sharper than ever. "You think experience is what matters? Let's talk about experience. I've seen what happens when people stay in power for too long. I've seen what happens when they stop listening to the people who actually need change. If you want to talk about experience, then fine. But the experience I have is the experience of a generation that's tired of being lied to. A generation that wants action." The reporter's smug smile faded as Karoline continued, her voice calm yet full of passion. "The real question isn't how much experience I have in politics. The real question is whether you or anyone else are willing to challenge the old guard, to make real change happen." The crowd was silent. The tension had shifted. This wasn't just about answering a question anymore. Karoline was defining what it meant to be a true leader. She wasn't here to be a puppet for the system. She was here to change it. And as she stood there, poised and calm, the reporter's arrogance crumbled. The tables had turned. The reporter opened his mouth to respond, but his words caught in his throat. Karoline had flipped the script. She hadn't just answered his question. She had exposed the problem with the system he was defending. His feigned concern about her youth and inexperience wasn't a genuine question about her qualifications. It was a subtle attack meant to undermine her. But in that moment, Karoline had shown that leadership wasn't about age or experience. It was about courage. It was about standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. The room was still, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The reporter, once so certain of himself, now looked lost for words. He tried to find his footing, but it was too late. Karoline had already made her point, and it was clear to everyone in that room. Karoline's voice, once calm, was now charged with a quiet but undeniable strength. You want to know what this country needs? It doesn't need more of the same. It needs change. And change isn't about waiting for permission from those in power. It's about having the courage to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The crowd was silent for a moment before breaking into applause. The reporter, caught in his own arrogance, stood there, stunned. His smirk was gone, replaced by a look of realization. He had underestimated Karoline Leavitt, and in doing so, he had given her the stage to show what true leadership looked like. As the reporters shuffled out of the room, the conversation had already shifted. The narrative wasn't about age or experience anymore. It was about the strength of conviction, the power of words, and the courage to face down those who think they can control the conversation. Karoline had put the woke reporter in his place, and in doing so, she had redefined what it means to lead.